I'll just jump right in. Best way to get into the cold stream rental. My name's Dr. Christopher Davis, and I am presenting today on Haiti, the risks of a failed state in the Western Hemisphere. Thank you for all coming out. I understand we've got a lot of great topics at this conference. We've got Ukraine, Hezbollah, Hamas, Russia, all kinds of things like that. So this is probably like the elective course that was left, you had left to choose from.
We're going to step over to the conference room. Everything under control here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. That's it.
But so thank you for coming out. And so I first started presenting at this conference on Haiti about 2 years ago, I think. And at the time, I was concerned. It was a few months after the assassination of President Jovenel Moise, and since there were a lot of factors that were eerily similar to the events that preceded the American invasion of Haiti in 1915 that were recreating themselves in Haiti in 2021, I was concerned about the situation and what that might mean for security in this hemisphere. Next slide. 2 years later, I'm afraid to say I was correct that today Haiti is considered you'll read in the headlines that it is a failing state or at risk of being a failed state. I would argue that it was a failing state when I brought this up 2 years ago. But let's look at how one would define a failed state. Whatever central authority cannot project authority over its own territory. It cannot protect its national boundaries. It cannot control the resources within its own territory. It cannot maintain societal order or law enforcement, and it cannot provide basic public services. Based on that definition, on all of that criteria, Haiti is not a failing state. Haiti is a failed state, whether we want to think of it as such or not. It's not something that can be stopped at this point. It has happened. So now we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean for security for the United States as well as the region as a whole? Next slide, please. So we're history focused here. So like any good historian, to figure out what's going to happen next, first we got to go back. And I'll take you to earlier in the 2000s, not to Haiti, to figure out where Haiti's problems came from. Surprisingly, we don't start the story of Haiti. We start in Venezuela. So in the early 2000s, during the Hugo Chavez regime in Venezuela, there was a program called the Petro-Caribe program. This was part of Chavez's ambitions to gain greater influence in the Caribbean region, and in his wildest dreams, in hopes of creating something of an anti-America alliance within the Caribbean and Central America. And in order to do that, Venezuela was willing to give the one thing Venezuela does have to give: oil. And of course, this was at a very different time when the early 2000s peak oil prices period, where Venezuela was still riding high on its profits. And at the time, they devised this plan that, well, we have more than enough oil, and what we can do to build favor in these Caribbean nations is start loaning them oil at a lower interest rate and deferring payment on 40% of the charge for 25 years. Now, you see on this chart the amount of oil that each of these nations got, Haiti included. And the other aspect of the deal was they did not dictate what you had to do with that oil. You did not actually have to use it for your own purposes. You could stockpile it, and then as countries that do not export oil, they could now be part of that international market and build their own profits that were meant to go towards infrastructure, healthcare, and nation building. And the idea that Haiti was one of these countries that could do that. Next slide. So between 2008 and 2016, Haiti made $4 billion worth of profit off of this program. And which was really handy because in 2010, there was the massive earthquake that devastated Port-au-Prince. So most Haitians were, well, thank goodness we have all this money coming in. But as from year to year, Haitians couldn't help but notice that for somebody having that much money, nothing seems to be changing. Nothing's been rebuilt. No infrastructure is being restored. No healthcare improvements have been made. Where did the money go? And an investigation determined that most of that money either went into the coffers of various Haitian politicians or were awarded to contractors that, let's say, did not go through the regular bidding process. It was definitely a crony payoffs, and one of the people heavily implicated in this scandal was, at the time, President Jovenel Moïse. So that's one strike against it. If you saw the headlines in July of 2021 and wondered what this guy did to be handed such a fate, that Petro Carib was strike one. The second one was a constitutional crisis over his presidential term. According to the Haitian Constitution, each president sits a 5-year term. Now, Haiti is not known for its political stability, and it was no different in his case. As he took office, it was in the midst of a coup. So the first year, a transitional government had to be in charge before he could serve his term. So in his mind, that meant when his 5-year term came up, he like, well, I've got a whole another year. I didn't get to sit in office the first year, so that's not very fair. Many Haitians disagreed with that interpretation of constitutional law, and he postponed the elections, and he postponed them again, and he continually pushed it down the line in flagrant disregard of the Haitian Constitution. And as more and more people object to this, he starts ruling more and more by decree. That's strike three. He dissolves the Haitian legislature, concentrates far more power around himself. Well, technically, he only dissolved 2/3 of the Haitian legislature, leaving just enough to not matter. But give the appearance that a legislature still existed. So, by July 7th, 2021, Jovenel Moïse is very dramatically and publicly known the details of his assassination. So, then you have a crisis of succession. Enter Prime Minister Ariel Henry. He takes a position as acting president, and this, which would make sense, but that the Prime Minister would take that role. But in order for him to officially become president, the legislature has to appoint him to that position. You might see the problem now. Before Moïse died, he dissolved the legislature, so there was no one legally able to appoint him president. But the Constitution did have a plan B. The Chief Justice of the Haitian Supreme Court, if the legislature was somehow incapacitated, was able to fulfill that function. Or at least he would have if he hadn't died of COVID 1 week before the president's assassination. So the fate is just not kind to the situation, and it is a perfect storm. So there is no one who can legitimately bestow authority upon him to be president until they hold an election, which, much like his predecessor, he keeps moving down the line. This makes Haitians quite angry. He also continues to rule by decree. February of 2023, a high transition council was appointed to facilitate elections later that year. Since you did not hear of Haitian elections on the news at that point, that you can guess what actually happened. So many Haitians saw his administration as illegitimate, And with that much public uproar, uh, you find a lack of functional government, fuel and food shortages, and worse still, the exponential growth of gang violence. Next slide. So this is probably where the most has been reported on the news. It's with so many different conflicts, it's hard to get airtime for these individual conflicts, but gang violence in Haiti is particularly eye-catching. At this point, it is estimated that there are between 200 and 300 different gangs that are currently operating within Haiti. 50% of those are estimated to be located in the capital, Port-au-Prince. And at this point, approximately 80% of the capital is under gang control. The central government is, whatever it is at this point, is not only not able to project power to the rest of the nation, it can only project power within 20% of the capital. But the interesting thing, as eye-catching as the escalation of gang violence is, it's not actually new to Haitian history. The use of gangs is actually an extension or evolution of a common practice used by various would-be Haitian leaders. Next slide, please. So the long history of Haitian political leaders and would-be leaders is filled with examples of them utilizing insurgents to come to power. That two key examples from the previous century are one example, the first Keiko War. It is not the first time it's been done, but it is probably one of the better documented examples of it. That a Haitian leader will come to power, a rival will decide that they wish that would rather be the one in charge. So they go up into the north, into the more mountainous regions, and collect insurgents, usually called cacos, named after a particular bird species that lives in the region, commenting on their ability to weave in and out of the trees virtually undetected. And so they typically will build up these insurgent Keiko armies, march on the capital, seize power, in hopes that the guy who promised them money will then pay up once he's in office. This was very cyclical because usually the guy would get there to find that the money isn't there, or he just decides not to give it to him, and then those insurgents would just fall in line under the next would-be leader.
Chris, one question, just
Yeah.
in case you know this, I'm curious. Is there a large enough mountainous population to create an insurgent force? Is there enough food and farming and organic food up there? Or are these small groups of men?
It is small, but also Haiti is a very small country in terms of space and population. So, I will say it was enough to keep the Marines busy for a couple of years in the early 20th century.
Thank you.
So, but to that effect, the first Keiko War, I mentioned that one because that one was crushed very quickly by the U.S. Marines. The second one was a longer one, but it was more reactionary to the long-term American presence there. And so, in more recent history, from Aristide to the present, there are many Haitian leaders use and supply gangs to carry out political will. So it's well known that many politicians in Haiti will actually have connections to gangs and then pay them to maybe if the election's coming up, go into a district that votes more heavily towards your rival, and bully people into not attending the election, or things like that. Basically, a back channel way of Haitian politicians enforcing their will. Now, what's changed in the last few years is that the gangs have stopped taking orders from political elites. That they've decided that the elites now needed them far more to enforce their will than vice versa. So the gangs have started working independently, and the elites have lost control of their previous tool. Next, please. And like I said, there were a lot of different gangs. There's several hundred different gangs, but some are more prevalent than others. In fact, the dominant one is called the G9 gang, or the gang alliance of nine. So it's more of a federation of gangs under a central leadership, under former cop turned gang leader Jimmy Barbecue Chevizier. And it sounds comical, but I've been scared to look to see how he got that name. It's probably
Mother had a barbecue, Jimmy.
yeah. I don't believe that's it, but
Yeah.
but I have my suspicions that it may have been something a little more sinister. So he he was a former police officer turned gang leader, believed to have had ties to the ruling Tet Kale party, but cut ties after Moise's assassination. It was believed that he was very much one of Moise's enforcers, and after that, he took it upon himself to regain control of the government on behalf of his former employer. So he formed the G9 Gang Alliance. Primary activities include extortion, targeted killings, weapons trafficking, and intermediary services. Smuggling.
Well, is the G9 significant in terms of their 9 games that he's applied, or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that he would be the authority over these nine.
And is that the most powerful grouping of gangs?
That's the most powerful. Their principal rival is GPEP, which is also another small gang alliance, but this one is the most powerful. But there are several other more independent ones.
Have these guys expanded beyond small arms? Do they have military weapons like just basic small caliber mortars, heavy machine guns, rocket launchers? Are they small arms only, or do they?
I am only from what I've gathered. I'm only familiar with small arms, but even where exactly they're getting those from is a topic of discussion we'll get to. Next slide. So this led, like a year after the assassination, this led to a question of what do we exactly do about it? And it's not like we haven't intervened in Haiti before, and the results were mixed to at best.
That's very charitable assessment.
Yes, it was charitably mixed, and at the same time, the American public at this point has very little appetite for another military venture such as the one from the early 20th century into Haiti, or even the one around the turn of the millennium. But surprisingly enough, one departure from history is that on October of 2022, acting President Henry actually asks for foreign military intervention. This is the first time a Haitian leader has actually requested somebody to invade their country. What's that?
I said, can you come in and debate us?
Yeah. It's going to sound like a weird request. But,
Do you know if he's Grand Federer? Yeah. Do you know if he's considered the United Nations? Because, for example, the Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, other countries have a very major, Canadians have a very major UN peacekeeper type history. Has he considered the United Nations peacekeeping forces?
that was, and we will get to that. So what happened is that call was open to anyone. He didn't specify. And there was the question the UN considered it, but the UN doesn't have great history there either.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest recent peacekeeping
Is it?
schemes.
Well, you're getting ahead of me. So the question is, who intervenes, and what does that intervention look like? Next slide. So, like I said, that call went out to anybody, and more than one party showed interest. The U.S. mulled it over, but for reasons I mentioned, was not keen to get involved without some deep consideration. The UN, the same. But suddenly, Russia started becoming far more active in Haitian affairs. That as the US and UN attempted to put measures through the UN, you find Russia and China blocking those. And at times, the Haitian politicians would often bring up, or sorry, Russian politicians would bring up, without direct accusations, they were quoted as saying that they would all but imply that the U.S. was interfering, causing the violence, and in some cases was even responsible for Moises' assassination in the first place. They didn't come out and say that, but they would make comments like Haiti's current state of affairs is due to external actors who have long been involved in Haiti's history. And so, next slide. So almost immediately after the call for international aid, before the U.S. or UN even commits to anything, suddenly you see a very new image among Haitian protesters. The crowds that are protesting against the Henry administration and international intervention. And that was another point I meant to bring up, is that the U.S. was wary about going in once again to prop up a Haitian leader. It's like, okay, well, we want to bring order to Haiti, but if we're not necessarily interested in preserving an illegitimate government by force of arms either. And so suddenly, these crowds start showing up with waving Russian flags, holding up some portraits of Vladimir Putin, and in some cases, even entertaining the idea that perhaps Russia should be the one to send troops to restore order. This was a major departure from anything we'd seen previously within Haitian protests. Next slide. So what we found was that Russia had, through several political messages at the UN and with regards to Haiti, began positioning itself as something of a, maybe, if not a hero to the Haitians, at least a foil against the American interference. And so they marketed Russian support as, and many Haitians saw this as Russia may be the, I don't really know much about Russia, but they seem like one of the few people who can be this deterrent against interference from what their former imperialist powers. And so I bring Russia up because Russia, of course, did not send troops, but they did start showing some interest in the idea of being someone who spoke on Haiti's behalf against forces like the UN and US. And this is occurring at the same time. You brought up Wagner. And it's interesting because you look at Wagner's activities in Africa. And they have this operational strategy of exchanging mining concessions for security and influence. And in many ways, that is not restricted to simply Africa. You also see it in Venezuela, Nicaragua, and maybe even Haiti. Next slide. So, give you examples of what's going on in Venezuela. By early 2019, Russian private military corporations linked to Wagner provided security for President Maduro. Wagner forces have trained elite Venezuelan combat units for security purposes, not just to protect Venezuelan interests, but to protect Russian interests, to oil refineries, mining areas that are of commercial interest to Russia. And there are allegations that Maduro has actually granted thorium mine access to Russia and Iran as compensation. Next. Nicaragua, 2013, Russian training center is established. main trade interests lie in gold mining. In 2022, President Ortega authorized Russian troops, planes, and ships to carry out law enforcement duties. And by August 20th, 2023, unconfirmed reports of President Ortega allowing Russia to station troops and establish military bases within Nicaraguan territory. As General Richardson at Southern Command would point out, this is right at our 10-yard line that the Russians may or may not be setting up shop. Okay. Last slide. So in April of 2023, documents were recovered that Wagner had actually expressed interest in securing contracts in Haiti that we can help counter your gang violence, that we can provide the security that you need. And if that's to be believed, then one would assume there's the usual reciprocity, that Russia would gain commercial mining and resource rights. But at this point, you're probably thinking, like what? Haiti doesn't have like mineral or oil wealth. Well, next slide. It should be noted that a distinction should be made that no resource exploration has occurred in Haiti since the 70s. It's just been too volatile for companies to do any serious kind of oil or mineral exploration. But and you can see that reflected here in these statistics from 2023. Total petroleum output, 0 barrels a day. Refined petroleum consumption, approximately 21,000 barrel a day. Crude oil and exports, none. Crude oil condensate imports, none. Crude oil estimated reserves, 0. Its main exports are much more agricultural, as you would assume. Essential oils, clothing and apparel, coffee, cocoa, bitter oranges, and mangoes. But in speaking to a friend who works in the petrochemical industry, I had a hunch, and I asked him, is there any chance Haiti has any kind of oil? And he said, absolutely. Even though we have not done any serious exploration, there is no reason to assume that the same oil shelf that Venezuela sits on does not go under Haiti as well. And in fact, that's just saying the tectonic activity that they experience alone is suggestive of several valuable minerals created by that much volcanic activity. Recent studies indicate the possibility and may possess even larger reserves than what Venezuela has. We just don't know. The region is estimated to contain at least 159 barrels of cubic feet of natural gas and 142 million barrels of oil. Estimates suggest potential undiscovered reserves to contain 1.2 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 941 million barrels of oil. In terms of gold, potentially could be $20 billion worth of gold in Haiti.
What's amazing is it's right now it's like one of those poorest per capita
They are
nations on earth.
one of the poorest countries on earth, may be sitting on a literal gold mine. And copper, that's becoming increasingly important once again. And the Meme mine alone in the 1960s exploited at least 2 million tons of 2% copper, and there's no reason to think there isn't plenty more there. So
The Dominican Republic shares the same island with them. What resources do they have?
that's actually a very good question. I've not seen much in the way of, and you've given me something to research, thank you. But they're not really known for those resources either. But you would think they would be in a better position to explore.
But they have achieved like a much more stable country.
Yes.
Obviously,
Yes.
by far, understatement. And they don't have, they're not screaming for help.
No.
Well, that would make them a nuisance. Prime candidate for somebody to explore oil if they was there.
Yeah, or make them a real prime candidate to begin with, we just get a little bit bigger.
Yes, because many Dominicans have not forgotten that Haiti once invaded and controlled them for a long period of time. So that
A wonderful port, great resources, cheap labor. What do Port au Prince be? Wonderful place for a refinery.
I hear the Russians are having some trouble with their refinery capacity recently.
yeah, some logistical hiccups, I think.
Yeah, just people, it's dangerous to smoke. Yeah.
Let's hope that continues so long.
Yeah. Next slide. So, that's the situation. They are literally potentially sitting on massive, massive uh, resources. And the main point that occurred to me that is like, if I can figure this out with Google in an evening, I'm imagining the Russians know all of this too. So I have no reason to doubt that Russia would have sincere interests with groups like Wagner setting up shop in Port-au-Prince.
Are those the Kenyan?
Those are the Kenyans, yes.
Good job capturing that photo.
Yeah. So
Very good capture.
yeah, I really liked that one. But so
I have to ask, how in God's name did they get talking doing this?
I'm glad you asked. So
I can speak to that too.
yeah,
I get paid by the United Nations.
Oh, I know, they get paid. But I mean,
well, part of the problem is
that's ask the Irish.
no, not after the what was it? What was the name?
Jadapto?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm thinking of that one. Yeah. But so what happened with the U.S. eventually decided that we're not going to intervene directly. We will finance an operation, but it will need to be a multinational effort that we're not the leaders of, because it can't look like we're just doing the same thing again.
So at the minimum, the Kenyans are looking at the ledger and going, okay, the US owes us, the US owes us, the US owes us.
Yes, and also there's but the big problem with all of this is that it took far too long. By the time they showed up, Henry had already been deposed. He had left the country and then was not able to return. And now there's no real central government.
There's another thing too, just briefly on the Kenyans. I have a close personal friend who's in the Bangladeshi army. He went to their West Point and he's a lieutenant colonel. And they routinely in Bangladesh participate in peacekeeping missions for two reasons. They get more money, but they also get combat experience.
Yeah.
And they're able to go out and do army type stuff, which is harder. They're very dense country. And so the Kenyans might be picking up on the fact that certain countries, including Canada, are using UN peacekeeping to develop combat skills in the absence of being like the United States to the expeditionary.
Now, on the other hand, there's a memorial in the main cemetery outside of Dublin to Irish who died on UN peacekeeping. There's a law.
Yeah, no,
I don't understand why there were pro-Palestinian demonstrations in Dublin.
yeah,
Go look at that memorial.
yeah, I believe it.
UN has also noticed peacekeeping forces tend to be more successful if they're the same color
Yeah,
population. They're
Yes.
That makes sense.
but as we're talking, the Bangladeshis, Fijians kept their army going for years on peacekeeping periods. Yeah.
And particularly in Haiti's case, that is extremely important because Haiti is the second oldest independent republic in the Western Hemisphere behind the United States.
And I guess there's not really anybody in West Africa that is francophone that could do it.
Not really in a position to. They have their own problems at the moment.
Ghana, do they speak French?
No, British Gold Coast once upon a time.
They have a significant peacekeeping presence, like infantry battalions.
Well, and I will say that, I mean, I haven't done it, but if you take a common infantry battalion and put it around less trained, less disciplined criminal gangs, a competent infantry that could make a difference in a situation like a capital city.
And from
Are
what
we
I
drawing on
understand,
the Kenyan Army or the police?
actually, the forces that Kenya is sending are part of their more elite counterterrorism.
Okay.
So they actually are, and that's actually one complaint I've had about this whole situation in Haiti is that at what point do we stop calling them gangs?
Yeah.
Because gangs seems
Yeah,
much beneath what these have evolved into. Like these
they're really light infantry.
yeah,
Feudal warlords.
yeah, a feudal war. I mean, you know, in
Well, I
some
mean, you're talking about Renaissance Italy with a bunch of Condottieri captains that recruited fighters and then go around looking for a contract.
yeah, if these same groups were in Haiti, you wouldn't, or in Syria, you wouldn't be calling them gangs. You would be calling them militias or terrorists, or but that even goes back to the U.S. occupation in the 20th century. Is that we never referred to them as insurgents, or we always called them bandits. There was always something.
How Russian of us.
Where do you think they learned it?
Boscanci.
Sorry. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Hi, yeah, I'm Julian Spencer Churchill. I did a presentation yesterday. I'm just fascinated because I did a piece with a former Canadian peacekeeper who was there in real clear defense about 2 or 3 months ago, and I just want to point out that yesterday I spoke with the in Montreal because of course Haiti recognizes Taiwan and it's Taiwan's celebration, so I bumped into a whole bunch of people. The deputy police chief for Port-au-Prince was here in Montreal, and I was talking with him. And the issue for them is, of course, Cote d'Ivoire speaks French. They've had, no violent changes of government. Ghana's got 4. So generally the reputation is that the French African states are more stable, but they don't want to get involved in what they think is a low probability success. I can tell you the Francophone Haitians are not happy with the Anglophone Kenyans. And this is from the deputy police chief. My 2 cents.
That is not surprising. And one of the biggest problems is that it took so long for the Kenyan forces to arrive. The first 400 of them didn't arrive until earlier this summer. And more on the way, but there were delays, one in getting them to agree to it, and then it was delayed further when it was determined that the president of Kenya, who is running through some of his own issues right now, unilaterally decided to deploy these troops as part of a peacekeeping force. And it was then that the Kenyan legislature objected to sending troops overseas without being consulted. So that took additional time.
So Chris, you just had a contributor say that the Canadians are peacekeeping in Haiti. Is that coming up on the future slides?
I do not have anything on the Canadian peacekeeping at this point.
I just found it when we said on the internet, there's Canadians in Haiti right now.
Oh, wow.
I didn't get that far.
Francophone, Anglophone.
Both of
You
them.
have to be bilingual to be a Canadian official.
Yeah, they're both. They have units that operate in English and French, but they are required to be bilingual.
And in terms of the first engagement between the Kenyan forces and the Haitian gangs, it didn't go as well as everyone hoped. Near the Dominican border, the town of Ganthier, there was an engagement where these gangs had completely taken over the town, or were poised to, and had they done so, it would have potentially opened up a way for them to get to another border town, which would have allowed things to funnel in from the Dominican side. And so these Kenyan forces were sent to retake the town, which should have gone much smoother than it did. But they were provided communications equipment and some armored vehicles, which are great. But armored vehicles alone aren't going to cut it. They were not provided any air or naval assets that might have been helpful to them. So no air cover, and they were able to be successful as long as they stayed. And as soon as they left, the gangs just sweep back into the town. So not an auspicious start. And in recent events, the multinational security support force, the U.S. and UN were trying to put in a resolution to make it an official peacekeeping operation, but it was blocked by, surprise, Russia and China. And so right now, what they're working on is having just the Kenyan mission extended for an additional year.
I see that was successful. End of September. So currently it's a United Nations mission, but it's not a UN peacekeeping operation.
Yeah, there's some distinction there that it's UN back, but it's not an official peacekeeping operation.
I did not know there was that gray area. I've worked with several UN peacekeeping forces.
So you're saying there's demarcation mission and peacekeeping, right? You've
I've
seen that, Captain?
I did not know until now that there was this distinction, but I'm seeing that the Haiti MSS mission,
Yeah.
this is something that is authorized by the United Nations Security Council. There's a Security Council mandate, and it was just extended by 12 months at the very end of September. But
I think a mission is a little more than peacekeeping because there are foreign factions that they're separating, and it's just criminality and devolution of government, so that's why it's a mission. It has grown to peacekeeping yet.
here we go. President LeBlanc calls for transitioning the MSS into a UN peacekeeping operation. It will further enhance stability by providing more reliable funding and expanding its capabilities.
Okay, so the original authorizing resolution was passed by 13 members of the Security Council with 2 abstentions. So nobody vetoed it.
Yeah.
They just said we didn't vote for it.
Okay, that's good.
But then that's what has to be extended.
So we're adding to your briefing because we all care.
Yeah.
This is really interesting.
This is a constantly evolving situation.
Yeah.
And
So, do you have much more to walk through? Or what?
no, I
This
think
is the
that
last
would
one.
actually be
So does this get worse? Why haven't we seen the kind of migrant flows?
well, it gets worse before it gets worse.
Okay.
So-
I mean, you still don't have any solution to rebuild this failed state. It doesn't seem like there's administrative apparatus. There's no commitment of Western aid, the significant quantity. It's still a dysfunctional society that's back to state of nature in a lot of ways. So, and sometimes the thing that gets the attention of the United States is that there's a surge of migrants coming, and that
Right.
we haven't seen that. So,
And the only 2 ways I see greater American attention being sent to is either the wave of migration or Russia sincerely starts trying to create something of a presence there.
where's the Cuban in this? No, I mean, you mentioned the Venezuelan petroleum program, but this vying for influence. Why don't you see more Cuban or Nicaraguan involved or Venezuelan?
Well,
Just too sticky a problem.
I believe it's cultural racism myself.
Okay.
that
Also, I mean, Venezuela's got so many problems of its own.
Oh yeah, but they.
Yeah.
right.
Right now,
That's
after-
one of
after
those like the
relax.
old song. You've got your troubles, I've got mine.
Yeah.
But
And that's the story to a large extent in Cuba since
Yeah.
Fidel passed the leadership of the brother. The other thing, and you nailed it, Haiti is the blackest country in the Western Hemisphere. The one instance anywhere in the world where a bunch of blacks were numerous enough to overthrow colonial domination, become independent, and therefore most of the rest of the developed world has taken the position, okay, let them stew.